Well, you must have been such a gift to the Beelzebubs because I remember when we were starting out, nobody could write arrangements. And
I don't know. Peter, I had to audition for the group 3 times. The character in Pitch Perfect, Benji, the like really nerdy guy who wanted to be in the group and nobody else wanted him, that was me. In fact, that character was based on me. I really acapella was my whole life, and I was absolutely transfixed and transformed when the Beelzebubs came to my high school in California back, in the early 80s. And all I wanted to do was be in the Beelzebubs. And I studied the group and I studied the arrangements and I showed up at the audition and I was called overzealous, which maybe nowadays is a compliment, but not back then.
they tried hard to screw it up, but I guess they couldn't. Thank God they let you in. I mean, that's the perfect irony of things. When you look back on something, you think, oh, they must have just fallen over for Deke when he came in. And so
it was the best thing that could have happened to me because it,
right.
it coiled my spring tighter, right? I had a year to cool my jets, take a deep breath, realize that, in fact, when I auditioned the third time, my secret was that I acted like I didn't care. And then he's the guy for us. Yeah, you got to remember, Peter, you remember back in those days, like acapella was really cool and fun on campus, but it wasn't a big thing around the country. Most people didn't know what the word meant.
I remember loving the Persuasions and Lambert Hendrickson Ross.
Yep.
And of course, the magic that you experience the first time when you're on the road and you go into that, this sounds bad, but go into that men's room at the McDonald's and you make music or that first stairwell, and it just blows your mind that you can be part of something so rich and alive. And so it was, what brought you to Tufts? Why did you go to Tufts if you were like, a cappella was everything?
So Chris Nomura went to my high school, and I actually was at high school with his younger siblings, 2 of his younger sisters. And so he brought the Beelzebubs back to California on tour. And I loved a cappella already. I was a huge fan of the Nylons and the Bobs and all these fantastic groups, like you said, the Persuasions. And then I heard the Bubs in my high school auditorium, and it was literally like that scene in the Blues Brothers. The shaft of light came down and hit me, and I felt like I was dancing in the aisles. And I was like, this is what I need to do. Between that and the double degree program, because I knew I wanted like a deep, liberal arts education, but at the same time, I wanted that conservatory experience where, violinists were practicing 14 hours a day in the halls. And this was the only double degree program in the nation. And I was like, that's it for me. This is it. Between that double degree and the Bubs, like, here we go. And the remains.
I studied at New England Conservatory too. I studied voice when I was there.
Well, it worked out pretty well for you, sir, with your lead roles on Broadway and your many musical performances. So talk to me a little bit about it. I know the torn ticket experience probably was central to your experience at Tufts, but what were the experiences at Tufts that really sparked your love of theater?
I didn't really come from a family where anybody went to the theater. It was my mom was first generation American. My dad was first person in his family to become educated. And so it was not about, let's go into the arts or it's like, how are we going to survive? How are we going to, make this transition? And so I think probably the first Broadway show my folks saw, I may have been in. And so it was the theater was a total, I had discovered it because of a great high school teacher. And I never, ever contemplated for a moment that it was something you could do for a living. I never thought you were supposed to be happy in your job or be inspired. I thought it was like, okay, you do a job you're miserable at for 40 years, and then you become slightly less miserable, and then you die. And then, okay.
And how are you doing by that metric, Peter? How would you characterize?
Well, fortunately, I have an economics degree. And it was actually a summer I spent out at Berkeley for a summer to get some extra credits and see a girl from Tufts, where I realized that I had no aptitude for economics. I studied non-Western economic thought and statistics, and they were showing all of these Shakespeare films. And it was that summer, seeing this stark contrast and not doing summer stock for the first summer of college. I went to did Priscilla Beach Theater with a bunch of Tufts students. So that's when I decided not to become work in TV or movies, but I'd give myself 7 years to try to make a living as an actor in the theater. And
I recall it took off right away.
I got Hair on Broadway in the revival in '77, and then Grease, the original company of Grease, which I did for 500 performances. And it was, really just, we became the longest running show in the history of Broadway at that point. But it was just the opportunity to be doing these things repetitively, where you start to learn, and also all the good teachers I've had along the way. I continue studying after college because there are a lot of great people out there.
That's great.
I should study from you and learn how to write.
No. I think you're doing just fine, sir. Your voice and your charisma. I would say that you have landed on your feet. Your Tufts degree has treated you well, and all your black box theater undergrad experience definitely served you well.
Well, I got to tell you, the thing that one of the most powerful things was when I looked at this, the student directory from 1973 to 74, and I saw this beautiful blonde from Needham, Massachusetts, to whom I'm still married after 38 years. And we did the first production of Follies after the original Broadway production with Torn Ticket.
Yeah.
And we got a letter that year from Stephen Sondheim saying, "We lost $4 million on the show. I hope you do better than we did." But meanwhile, Paula Harwood, my wife, was a showgirl, and I played Roscoe the tenor in that production. And I would just watch her move. And I'd sing my Hats Off Beautiful Girls, run up to the balcony, and watch her float across the stage. And what I thought was a completely see-through transparent gown with a towering headdress. And I told this story for ages until recently my wife said, Peter, that was a black velvet gown with and a tiny little tiara. So clearly anything I say about my college experiences has been filtered through.
It's suspect, but you know what? The memories shine brighter and brighter.
They do, right?
So how has the musical theater and the movie industry been for you during this year of lockdown? Have you had an opportunity to do anything remotely?
Well, yes. I mean, what was kind of amazing with one of your old colleagues, Skylar Aston,
Right.
I was able to do all of the first season of Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist.
Right, and congratulations.
Where we sing and we dance.
Yeah, yeah.
It turns out that this remarkable show, Zoe's Extraordinary Playlist, showed up and asked me to do all these things that I'd started doing years and years and years ago on Broadway for a new audience, for a huge audience. And I just felt so lucky. And I can't imagine how this has impacted you, because as another performing artist, it comes to life when you're in the room together and in the room with your audience, when that magic happens.
No question. And in fact, with a cappella, it's even more so. The biggest challenge, I would say, big picture meta for my career is trying to figure out how to take the magic that happens in the room and translate it to the screen, large and small, television and movies. There's a reason a cappella is at the core of so many religious ceremonies and so many special moments in people's lives. If you think about holiday carols and you think about, large Gothic cathedrals and the boy choir's voices ringing out. I mean, there's something incredibly powerful and connecting about vocal harmony. And to make that happen in a little YouTube screen is a whole different experience. And you're absolutely right. Much of what I do in my life now is to travel around the world and to work with singers, work with groups, try to inspire people. And, little Johnny Appleseed, but I'm planting pitch pipes instead of fruit trees. And that's gone with COVID. So there have been Zoom meetings and classes and trying to kind of do this remotely, but I can't wait until I get my second vaccine shot and can get back out on the road and get people singing and spreading harmony through harmony again.
My daughter's been, her show, she was doing Jagged Little Pill. Got a Tony nomination. In fact, at the same theater that I got a Tony nomination in 1986.
That's a nice piece of history, yeah.
But there's a real feeling among her cast and her colleagues there on Broadway these days that it'll be an exciting day when those theater doors reopen. And I remember we were doing Noises Off. And our first day of rehearsal was 9/11. And 4 weeks later, there was anthrax in the air, and people were proclaiming that Broadway would be dead. People would be too scared to go. And the first day we opened our doors, people filled the theater, to pack the theater. And they never thought they'd laugh again. And the sounds they made, it sounded like surgery without anesthesia. It was, the laughter was so explosive.
The arts have been the thing that have kept people together and sane through all of this, and unfortunately the arts are also the community and the business sector that's been the hardest hit. To those of my friends who are out there watching this who are artists, like we're coming back, baby. It's just a matter of time. Here's a question that probably a lot of people have been wondering: what advice would you give to an undergrad or someone who's recently graduated and wants to have a career in the arts?
God help you. I guess I would say if you want to have a career in the arts, to really search your soul and see if there's nothing else you'd like to do. You know, if there's anything else that intrigues you too, it should really follow that. But if at the end of the day you think, oh my gosh, this is what I want, this is what I want, then you have to show up to it. Because you don't want to be spending the rest of your life wondering if you could have or you should have. Because when you start to listen to yourself and be a little brave, you might not end up exactly where you think you want to go, but chances are you'll end up exactly where you need to be.
That's literally the exact same speech that I give every time I work with high schoolers, because they always ask me, like, what do I need to know if I'm going to go into the arts? What advice do you have? And I literally say to them every single time, if you could see yourself doing anything else as a career, do that. Because you'll always have the arts. You can always make music. You can always, and no one can tell you what to do. But and also know that there are going to be people who are going to stay up later, get up earlier, undercut you. Like, there's always going to be someone who's going to be working harder than you. But if nothing I say will dissuade you from a career in the performing arts, welcome to the club. When I told people, even my friends and the Beelzebubs and the alumni, like, I told them I was going to make a career of a cappella, they either laughed behind my back or to my face. Like, those were the two options. And people
they felt sorry for you.
Like, what are you going to do for money? I was like, no, it's going to be big, and we're going to have festivals, and we're going to have like compilation CDs and, publishing company, and people are going to get together, and a cappella is going to be really big. It's going to be huge. You'll see. And they were like, okay. And my high school choral director literally said to me, these were, well, he didn't say them to me, he said them to everyone else. He said, it's like Deke's trying to make a career out of professional tiddlywinks. Literally said, and if your high school choral director is not on board with your vocal music career, you know that nobody is. But I couldn't do anything else. I had to. I loved it too much, and I felt like there's lightning in a bottle, and if people only knew how wonderful a cappella is, they would love it. And it was a long time to be an overnight success, 25 years of building and building, but now people know what it is, and so many more people are singing as a result. So that's what I wanted to do. And the Beelzebubs and Tufts University were the launch pad, were the place where I learned what I needed to be able to go out into the world and do that.
If you'd told anybody that you were going to be part of really successful movie franchise that featured a cappella music while you were an undergrad, they would have locked you up, because nobody would ever imagine that. Where are the explosions? Where are the car chases? So how did that happen?
Yeah,
I'm talking about PitchPerfect. Not only 1, but 2 and 3. You were like the music director on too, and I imagine you sang, and I'm sure you. How many arrangements were those?
I was lots of arrangements, and then I was also the German commentator in the second movie.
Yeah, you were so good.
I don't even speak German, but I can sound like I do.
That's never stopped me from doing stuff.
I always knew, like, if we could just get a cappella in the heart and the soul of this wonderful style in front of people, people would love it. But it blew up way bigger than even I thought it possibly could. When you let go and just kind of go for the thing that you know that you feel in your heart is right for you, then that's when you're doing the right thing in the arts.
Well, you know what? I'll tell you a funny story. I had the great fortune of doing Long Day's Journey tonight with Jack Lemmon.
Ooh.
And he was like a father to me. And when we were in London and doing Long Day's Journey after the Broadway run, we were a big, 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 big hit. And I always knew when he was happy with his performance, when he really felt he'd done it great, he'd want to rehearse with me that night because we had these big scenes together.
Right.
And I'd always know we were, after our curtain call, we're exiting right and said, hey, kid, you want to do a little work? I'll buy you a sandwich. And I said, Jack, sure, I'd love to. And so we'd rehearse the scenes, and they were some of my favorite moments of my life. Even for Jack Lemmon, who's got everything, he's got won this, he's won that, and he's doing this. But the thing I learned about him, he was like a terrier because he's always wanted one more chance to get it right. He had that hunger in him and that fire in him, and I'll never forget it. And that's the other thing you learn when you start to follow a path you want to be on, is you encounter people that really open up your eyes and your heart to the world that you thought you wanted to be part of, and with any luck, you'll discover it's exactly where you belong. And get one more chance to try to get it right.
And I look forward to seeing you finally get it right, Peter, one of these days.
Oh my gosh, I promise you it might happen. I got so close the other day, but no.